Hi everyone, it's Kate at Candid Chronicles and welcome to my video. So today is actually the autumn equinox, and because it's the equinox and because I kind of wanted to do a sort of autumn book talk, I suppose, about a bunch of books that I would really recommend for autumn. That's what today's video is all about. So I've chosen 7 books that are sort of like have an autumnal vibe, especially some of them may be a bit magical as well. So I've got those books to hand, so I will go through them one by one. So the first book on the list is a book by Holly Black. So Holly Black, if you haven't read her books, they are amazing. So I first got into her through the book Teeth or Tithe, and really enjoyed the book. But yeah, there's quite a few books that she's written in the series, and this is they're sort of like mini-series within the same world, and this is one of the books that's in that world that she's created of fairies, but in a modern sort of, modern setting, I suppose, kind of like of normal people, as well, dealing with the fact that there are fae and mythical creatures about, and this is one of her books. So I got it quite a few years ago now, and it's about this girl and her brother, and I'll just read the little synopsis. It says, "Near the little town of Fairfold, in the darkest part of the forest, is a glass casket. Inside lies a sleeping fairy prince that none can rouse. He's the most fascinating thing Hazel and her brother Ben have ever seen. They dream of waking him, but what happens when dreams come true? In the darkest part of the forest, you must be careful what you wish for." So it's it's sort of like about fairies, about knights, about sort of obviously love and magic, and it's sort of about this main girl, Hazel, and I think when she was younger she made a deal, and she doesn't even know what the deal is, but the whole premise of the book is a bit about that deal, as well as the fact that this fairy prince that's in this casket is woken up, and it's sort of all about the kind of adventures that happen and problems that ensue, and it's really cool. I really enjoyed it. It's sort of got a very sort of autumnal air, I feel, just because, but then I kind of feel like Holly Black's, all her books sort of have an autumnal feel, or certainly like magical feel, which relates to sort of this time of year, just because of October coming up, and that's like Halloween season. So that's one of the reasons why I chose this book, and just check it out, read it. It's really good. If you haven't read any of Holly Black yet, you can still read this book. It's a standalone book. It's not part of an actual series. It's just in the same world as some of her other series. So you can still read each series as like guest standalone. Pick up this book. If you haven't checked out Holly Black, like I said, you can pick up any of her books and kind of get into the world, as it were. But Teeth or Tithe is really good, but definitely recommend for the autumn reads this book. So the next book I read probably about a year or two ago now, probably about 2, even maybe 3 years ago. It's called An Enchantment of Ravens, and it's so autumnal because basically it's also about fairies, again like the Holly Black book that I've just talked about, and this one is about the autumn court. So autumn literally is part and parcel of the plot. It's basically about this girl who's kind of got like this deal with all these fairies of painting portraits of them, and she gets tasked with painting a portrait of the autumn fairy prince, but when she unveils the portrait, the prince really hates it and is like, shocked by it, and basically takes her away back to the Autumn Court as punishment. And it's sort of all about her experience with the Autumn Court and all the stuff that's going down with them, and just lots of magic and lots of kind of interesting autumnal stuff that happens. It's really cool. I'll read the back. It says, every enchantment has a price. Isabel is a prodigy portrait artist with a dangerous set of clients, the immortal fair folk. But when she receives her first royal patron, Rook, the Autumn Prince, she makes a terrible mistake. She paints mortal sorrow in his eyes, a weakness that could cost him his life. Furious, Rook spirits Isabel away to stand trial for her crime, but something is seriously amiss in his world, and they are attacked from every side. Forced to depend upon each other for survival, their alliance blossoms into trust, perhaps even love, a forbidden emotion that would render both their lives forfeit. What force could Isabel's painting conjure that is powerful enough to defy the ancient malice of the fairy courts? So yeah, really, really enjoyed it. I think I love the cover as well. I think it's by one of my favourite artists, and it's really annoying because I've literally forgotten their name and it's really bad, but cover design, cover illustration, copyright Charlie Bowater. So that's who the artist is the illustration anyway, Charlie Bowater, and I absolutely love her art, and I think it really complements the book. It's just beautiful, as you can see, as you can see the Rook and Isabel in the background, and just a stunning book, obviously stunning cover, but very autumnal, very on point for this time of year. So the next one, I feel like quite a lot of my books that I've chosen have got a fairy theme to it, but that's probably because this time of year I always find it's sort of that magical time of year, like I was saying. It's sort of that coming into autumn, but October time is fairly soon. Then that's obviously Halloween time, and it just, I don't know, plays nicely in with the fairy theme, and that's my thinking anyway. So the next book is called Cuckoo Song. Cuckoo. That sounds really funny to say, but it's a really, really good book. This is a book by one of my absolute favourite authors, and the author is Frances Hardinge, and she's written quite a lot of books. There's things like The Lie Tree and Fly By Night. I think quite a lot of her books are sort of aimed at young adults, but maybe even children. It's in between the sort of children's and young adult. So her characters are around between like probably 12 to 18. So it kind of mixes in between the two age groups. But the stories are absolutely stunning and like on par with proper adult books in terms of some of the stuff that goes down. I mean, honestly, like some of the ideas that she comes up with they're just amazing. But in any case, this particular book, it starts off where this girl wakes up and she just feels really odd and wrong, and she finds herself like forgetting things, and she's really hungry for everything, even like rotten fruit and just odd things, and she will eat anything, and she just feels like odd and wrong, and something's happening. And you find out that actually what's happened is that she's sort of like a puppet being placed in the place of this other girl. And it's just, I can't even like talk about it kind of with any premise of like amazement, because it blew my mind away when I read it because of the ideas of it. And it sort of is all about this family and the secrets and like lies that have gone on in the background and have kind of, I can't think of the word, basically culminized in Triss, this girl, actually being made into a puppet, and or a puppet made of her. And the reason why it's called Cuckoo Song is because she's like the cuckoo in the nest, and you know, it's almost like the age-old stories of like fae children being put into the cradles of you know, human children, and the human children being taken away. It's basically like that, but instead of like, she's sort of like a changeling, and but she's just a really strange changeling in the fact that she's this puppet that won't last very long, that she's dying as like she lives. Well, yeah, as she goes on living, she's actually dying. And so her kind of premise is the fact that she has to find out who she is and who made her, and find out who the real Triss is, and find out where she is, and bring her back to the family. And yeah, there's lots of other stuff that goes on, but it's just really, really good, really, really enjoyable. I was absolutely entranced the whole way through, and I have collected all of Frances Hardinge books because I just love all her books so much. Her writing's just so good. So yeah, definitely feel like it's a really good recommend, but also like autumnal theme because of the fact that it's sort of like, yeah, magical, fairy-esque sort of, but yeah. And it's also set sort of like in between Victorian and, would it be Edwardian times? So yeah, it's sort of like in between that period of time. Oh, actually, no, kind of, it's after Victorian times if I remember, because it's after I don't know if it's the First World War or the Second World War, but certainly one of the world wars, it's sort of around that period. So yeah, just to let you know that. And yeah, really, really good book. So I will put that aside and move on to the next one. So the next one is also another sort of like fairy tale book. It's I don't really think it's sort of like fairies, but it's sort of fairy tale-esque, and I kind of feel like it's a good autumn book. It sort of like plays into the whole mystical and magical a little bit, but you know, more fairy tales. And yeah, it's called The Hazel Wood. So I'll read the back. It says, Alice has spent most of her life on the road, always one step ahead of the strange bad luck biting at her heels. But when Alice's grandmother, the reclusive author of a book of pitch-dark fairy tales, dies alone on her isolated estate, the Hazel Wood, Alice discovers how bad her luck can really get. Her own mother is stolen away by a figure who claims to come from the supernatural world where the fairy tales are set. Alice's only clue is the message left behind: stay away from the Hazel Wood. To rescue her mother, Alice must venture first to the Hazel Wood, then into the world where her grandmother's tales began. So yeah, it's kind of like still along that vibe of fairy tales and fairyland, like fairyland-esque, but yeah, more sort of like fairy tales rather than fairyland, if there's a kind of difference. It's difficult to explain because basically there's no actual, I don't even know if there's actual fairies. It's more like the fairy tales, things like princes and dragons and monsters and that kind of thing happening. But yeah, it's about this girl, and you know, her mother's like stolen from her, and her grandmother's dead, and all she has like to go on is the fact that she shouldn't go into this Hazel Wood. And of course, well, she's like, well, my mother's been taken into the Hazel Wood, so I must go after her. And it's all about her journey into the Hazel Wood and discovering actually who she really is and her past and why her grandmother wrote these tales and why her mother's been stolen. And it's just, to be honest, like the whole premise of the story was such a kind of whole twist on fairy tales, and it was just amazing, and I really enjoyed it. I think I recommended this on my blog for a previous month, but literally would always recommend this book. It's so good, and yeah, I would say it's very autumnal-esque read. That's a word, but yeah, very good, and definitely recommend. So yeah, check that out if you're thinking about a good autumn read. So on to I think this is number 5. So number 5 is Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book. So this is actually a children's book. It's set sort of in real life, but basically it's about this boy who his whole family is murdered, and he manages to escape to this graveyard, and all the ghosts and this guy who I think is possibly a vampire decide to look after him and keep him safe until he's grown up enough to find out what happened to his family and stuff. So I'll read the back. It says, "Nobody Owens, known to his friends as Bod, is a normal boy. He would be completely normal if he didn't live in a graveyard, being raised and educated by ghosts. There are dangers and adventures for Bod in the graveyard, but it is in the land of the living that real danger lurks, for it is there that the man Jack lives, and he has already killed Bod's family." A deliciously dark masterpiece by best-selling author Neil Gaiman, with illustrations by award-winning Chris Riddle. Yeah, I think Chris Riddle's the illustrator, and I really like his work. And yeah, it's just really interesting book. And I like to read it sort of this time of year, certainly October time, because of the ghostly feel, but it's not too scary. There's other things that go on, like monsters and other kind of supernatural creatures, but mainly it's the kind of ghostly-esque vibe to it that really sets it apart as an autumnal book. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's quite easy to read, quite easy to pick up and get into the story. Not too challenging at all. And yeah, whether you're reading it for yourself or even thinking of maybe even getting the book for one of your kids or a kid you know, I would definitely recommend it. It's, like I said, it's not too scary, and it's just an enjoyable read, and I really enjoyed it. So that's number 5. So number 6, which is a book I read quite recently, it's called Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier, and I absolutely loved it when I read it. It was just such a kind of gothic-y kind of novel, and I think that's why I recommend it as an autumn read, because of the sort of gothic feel to it, and sort of it talks about the misty moors, and it just feels like it's sort of a really good book to curl up on a sort of late autumn eve and just really kind of immerse yourself in sort of the atmospheric nature of the book. So it's basically about this girl called Mary, I think her name is, and I think it's Mary. I'm going to double check that, because I'm when you're just hold on, double checking, it is Mary. It is Mary, yeah. I was thinking, I'm sure it's Mary, but I'm just double checking, because otherwise I'm just completely blurting out kind of the premise of the character and story and completely getting it wrong. But actually, no, I am right. It is a girl called Mary, and her mother's just died. And apologies, my throat's a bit itchy, so I'm just going to have a drink. I hate that when that happens. So yes, it's about this girl called Mary. Her mum dies. And I can't speak now. And basically she's like, well, what do I do? Where do I go? And it's set in the sort of 18th century. So she goes off to stay with her aunt, and when she gets there, it's not a nice reception, let's just put it that way. She meets her uncle, who is the owner of the Jamaica Inn, and he's involved in all sorts of murder and smuggling rings and lots of awful stuff. And Mary's like, oh my god, I need to tell someone, but I don't know who to trust and who to kind of like speak to, because I don't want to end up hurting my aunt, who she wants to protect her aunt and like wants to kind of get her aunt out of this situation, but doesn't know how. And yeah, she kind of gets all caught up in all the smuggling, and she ends up falling for someone who she really shouldn't, and she knows she shouldn't, but anyway, there's a bit of a love affair going on in there as well. So yeah, really good book, really recommend it, and really enjoyed it just for the gothic-y kind of feel to it. So yeah, there's that one. Have another drink. Right, so my last book, which I feel is probably one of my favourites. I've read it quite a number of times, and if you haven't heard of it, will be very shocked, because it's quite a well-known book. It's a well-known TV series, and I've chosen it because I think it has a very sort of autumnal feel to it to start off with, but I would say maybe not quite at the very beginning, but certainly when you get into it, you kind of feel maybe the autumn vibe because of the time of year that it happens, or the situation happens. So, dun dun dun, the book is called Outlander, and yeah, I got this book a number of years ago. I got it when I was 18, and that was, oh my gosh, probably like 15-16 years ago now. So that's how long I've had it, and I've read it probably about 3 or 4 times, probably not as many as I could have read it, but I've certainly read it enough times to absolutely love it. And to be able to read it a couple of times is amazing, because sometimes I just sit there and go, yeah, not bothered, I'll just read this one time and then give the book charity or whatever. But this book, I absolutely love it, and I love the series. TV series is awesome as well. So yeah, if you don't know about the book or the TV series, like I said, I'm very surprised, but it's essentially about this woman called Claire, and she it starts off like in 1945, and she's with her husband in Scotland in the Highlands, and she basically goes to this sort of Stonehenge, touches the stones and gets transported back to the 1700s, and she's like, oh my god, you know, what's happened? And she gets caught up in all sorts of like troubles, but one thing is she ends up being is like married off to a Scot from that era, and she's like, all I want to do is get home, and yet I'm kind of stuck in the 1700s. I don't know like how to get home and back to my original husband, and the whole story is sort of leading up to the whole, probably the first couple of books are sort of leading up to Culloden, and it's all about kind of the relationships of the Scots and the English that are going on behind the scenes, but it's primarily a love story as well. It's absolutely got like so much romance in the story. It's just really amazing, and I think what I love about it is not just the romance, but I think it's just the level of historical detail that the author goes into, and it's, I mean, it just is so good, such a good story. And I know like the history of the story is like Diana Gabaldon was like, I want to try and write a book and see if I can do it, and she wrote it and sold it and published it, and everyone was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then she's obviously carried on the whole story. And I've read quite a few books in the series. I haven't read all of them, but I've read quite a few, probably about 5 or 6 of the books, and I think there's about 6 or 7, maybe 8. So yeah, there's quite a few books. So if you're interested and haven't read the book yet, recommend it completely. It's a nice thick book, so if you're looking for a good sized book for autumn to curl up with of an evening with a nice cup of tea or a cup of hot chocolate or something, I would so recommend it. It's such a nice, really, really nice story. It's just, you know, really interesting with the historical aspects, really lovely with the romance, but also there's a lot of other stuff that goes on that in parts it's quite horrifying, but there's other stuff that goes on that's like, oh my god, you know, how's it going to end and what's going to happen, and you kind of follow on the story in Claire's eyes, and Claire's such a good character. Just really love her character. She's such a strong, independent woman, and going into like the sort of late 18th century, it's kind of completely going from 1945 backwards 200 years. She's just like, you know, completely different culture, and yeah, it's just amazing. Just love the book so much. So that is my 7th and final book of well, autumnal books that I would recommend. By all means, I would recommend you share your books that you'd recommend in the comments below, and yeah, hope you have a good time reading over the next coming months, and happy autumn equinox, which is today. So thanks guys for watching. See you, bye bye.